SMD, and I'm going to introduce our TED Talk Tuesday team in a moment. But first, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for tuning in and learning with us today about the topic of strategic disruption by our guest speaker, Lavar Thomas. So, TED Talk Tuesdays is a concept that was created by the Region 3 Engagement Network. And that's a council of employees from across the region who think deeply about ways to engage employees in this hybrid universe that we live in. And one of the offerings that we've developed is called TED Talk Tuesdays, a TED Talk about an important or relevant or fascinating topic. So some of a few of our past topics have been forest bathing, which is a fascinating and relevant topic to the EPA land. And we had our last TED Talk Tuesday discussion on neurodiversity, led by our very own JJ Dagan. And another one has been on gratitude and death. As far as today, our guest speaker is our own EPA former Region 3 colleague, now hailing from headquarters, Lavar Thomas. For this TED Talk Tuesday talk, he will introduce us to the concept of strategic disruption. So we first like to also make sure that we're in a safe space. This is engaging, and we'd like to be chatty to the extent where you feel comfortable. Now, if you feel free, if you're just typing in the chat and either engaging with us with emojis, let us know that you're here and you're listening, and you can give a reaction, a clapping, a hearts, or a thumbs up or thumbs down. So feel free to be active in the chat. One thing I'd like to ask is if you can upvote any questions or comments that you see that you really like instead of retyping it, because the TED Talk Tuesday team will be able to know which questions and comments should be lifted in the event we have too many questions to cover them all. So please upvote any that you see that you really like. So for the run of the show, it'll be, as past TED Talk Tuesdays have been, a little bit of intro, then a short TED Talk, then our guest speaker, Lavar Thomas, sharing his insights and perspective on strategic disruption. And then we will have time throughout the conversation to post questions, and then the planning team members will let the facilitators know if we have any questions for the guest speaker. So I just went over the run of show. We'll end by about 150 or 155 or so, and we are recording this. Now, the TED Talk Tuesday planning team comprises of Lena Kim, JJ Dagan, Brittany Clark, and Gina Sosa. If you all want to turn your cameras on and just wave hello to everyone. So with that, we will get started. If anyone has any comments or questions in the chat, you can type them now. Now I'll turn it over to Lena to introduce our speaker.
Brandy, thank you. You covered so much and so seamlessly. And I'm not gonna do any intros other than Lavar. I used to sit next to you. I was there on your first day at EPA. I think Gina Socia was down the hall. And one of the first things I asked Lavar is, what do you want to do in the future here? And one of Lavar's answers was, I want to be on the TED Talk stage someday. And years later, you're going to see what happens. So that's all I'm going to say.
Very cool. All right, I'm going to share the TED Talk. Let's get started. All right, if someone can give me just a thumbs up that they hear the audio when it starts playing.
We hear it. Thanks, JJ.
Perfect.
By show of hands, how many of you remember the first time you learned to ride a bike? Okay. Now, by another show of hands, how many of you remember falling off your bike? Okay, so I know I'm not the only one who has ridden into a mailbox as a kid, right? At a very young age, we learned some of our first lessons in understanding our comfort zone. And while you were learning, maybe you started out with a tricycle before leveling up to training wheels, but to truly experience the bliss of riding your bike, you had to eventually take your training wheels off. Despite falling and the bumps and bruises that it brought, you made the choice to get back up and to try again. And once we learned to ride our bike, our world and identity shifted, right? Now we had a bit more freedom, and our identity and world expanded. We were no longer limited to our yards, but we slowly pushed the boundaries and made our way to the mailbox, right? Then to our friends' houses, to eventually the pool or the park?
Braden has amazed me. He's so
However, little by little, our world, our comfort zone, and our perspective shifted as a result of this experience. There was now more to the world than we once knew. In our time together, I want to help you fall out of love with your comfort zone and in love with the process of going beyond what you know. I wish to share with you the power of strategic disruption. So let's first define what strategic disruption is not. Oftentimes, when we hear the phrase disruption, it's used in the context of global markets or new technology disrupting old trends. In other instances, we hear the term used when an event causes a major disturbance, but I'm not referring to that context. When I use the term strategic disruption, I'm referring to the deliberate choice to pursue paradigm-shifting experiences that alter our sense of self and the world around us. It's a process where we begin to disrupt the narrative, particularly a narrative of how we see ourselves, our choices, and what we believe is possible. It's a process where we begin to challenge our self-limiting beliefs, whether they were rooted in our accomplishments, setbacks, or our environments. A few examples of what this can look like is our willingness to learn a new language, our ability to return back to school after some time off, or move to a new place, or walk away from a job or relationship that no longer serve us. Although uncomfortable, strategic disruption introduces us into our authentic selves. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, it was easy for my world to be defined by the boundaries of my community. There was little to no expectation of what a young black man can accomplish given the poverty and incarceration rates. So because I didn't want to become another statistic, I sought experiences that would expose me to something different. My first strategic disruption came as a high school sophomore. My first year, that year I went to Mallorca, Spain, and the following year I went to Italy, and in my senior year I went to France. And these experiences radically disrupted my world as a 15-year-old. Each experience planted a seed of a global perspective that expanded my world beyond Brooklyn. After moving to Massachusetts for undergrad, I decided to walk away from my job as a legislative aide to become a Peace Corps volunteer in Rwanda, East Africa. My decision came after a conversation I had with my political science advisor at Clark University. I learned about her Peace Corps service and her journey to discovering her passion for Middle Eastern politics. And I thought it was so unique because I didn't know anyone who looked like me who did that. It was probably one of the scariest decisions of my life, but I knew the opportunity to study abroad, to learn a new language, and to gain a cross-cultural experience would transform my world and my life. Now, this experience not only expanded my perspective, but it allowed me to learn about leadership. It helped me to understand what it meant to navigate an international experience as a Black American, but more importantly, it taught me my purpose beyond the opinions of others. Now, this isn't a pitch to join the Peace Corps or to live abroad, even though it's a great opportunity. However, it is a pitch for you to give yourself a passport to leave your comfort zone and to explore the possibilities of who you are beyond your narrative and your environment. So how do we create strategic disruption? The first step to creating strategic disruption is through awareness. Becoming aware of your feelings of dissatisfaction, feelings of discomfort, or a sense that there has to be more to the world than what you're currently experiencing. It's asking yourself the question, am I playing full out with my life, or am I playing it safe? In other words, am I living or am I existing? The second step to creating strategic disruption is examining the areas of your life where you feel stuck. What patterns are you noticing? These could be patterns of decision-making, thought processes, or environments that you continue to place yourself in. And the third step to creating strategic disruption is understanding the type of strategic disruption you need and taking action. Now, this tends to be the hardest step because it requires us to hold ourselves accountable, take responsibility, and disrupt a narrative that's taking place in our minds about what's not possible. The deceptive part about our comfort zone is the fact that only we can determine that threshold. What may be within my comfort zone may be far beyond yours, and vice versa. So when we attempt to create strategic disruption in any place in our lives, we have to customize that disruption to the breakthrough that we seek. Keep in mind that it shouldn't be too familiar. It's not about recreating an environment where we maintain complete control. And no, it is not a 3-day cruise on Carnival, right? Because I know some of you are thinking that. But it requires us to have an internal shift. So what are some of the benefits of strategic disruption? The first benefit is that it offers self-development and self-discovery. When we commit to leave our comfort zones, we learn about our interests, our strengths, and our weaknesses. It also helps us to expand our perspective on our world and provide clarity around our purpose. The second benefit is that it teaches us flexibility and adaptability. Strategic disruption has a way of forcing us beyond our comfort zone and getting us to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which translates into cultural awareness, empathy, but more so adaptability. And the third benefit of strategic disruption is that it allows us to cultivate authenticity and authentic relationships. When we understand and embrace who we are, we're able to sustain longer and better relationships. We get to be ourselves in a room where so many people feel like they need to be something else. So when we think about strategic disruption and showing up as authentic in our authentic selves, it leads us to make authentic relationships, which can translate also into job offers, collaborations, but more so meaningful relationships. So what does it look like to facilitate strategic disruption in the lives of others? In 2016, when I ended my Peace Corps service, my co-founder Ruby and I created Leaders of the Free World with the intention of addressing the underrepresentation of young Black men in international education. Research shows that studying abroad helps individuals to increase their self-confidence, maturity, and job skills. Yet among Americans who study abroad, 6% are Black and only 2% are Black men. Over the past 7 years, we've taken students to Ghana, West Africa, where we explore different themes in leadership, helping our students to gain a cross-cultural experience and understand their comfort zones, but more so, developing a deeper understanding of who they are. For many students in our program, this is the first time they've owned passports, left the country, or have flown in a plane. And beyond the trip, our students gain mentorship from industry leaders and are provided a space where they can be vulnerable and challenge the self-limiting beliefs that they have. Once they return, they boast about no longer being afraid to show up as their authentic selves. They feel more self-confident and they have a bigger vision for their life and their impact in the community. So through this form of strategic disruption, our students receive accountability, the community support, and the tools to write a narrative for their life and an impact for the world. So what does 15 years of strategic disruption look like? As you can see. So I love this picture because it shows my personal journey and transformation. The biggest difference between these two young people has been a shifting of a narrative. The young person to the left that you see was me as a 17-year-old in high school as a part of the international student exchange program I had mentioned to you. And I was in France at the time of that picture. And the picture on the right was taken last December as a part of the Atlantic Dialogue's Emerging Leaders Program in Marrakesh, Morocco. Now, the difference between these two images really was that the person I've grown into is no longer afraid to push the boundaries of who I am and who I can become. The kid on the left sought interesting and different experiences, but the man on the right sought to create a pipeline to help other young Black men and other individuals maximize their life and their impact in the world. Your strategic disruption doesn't need to look like mine to be transformative. However, it does require you to get uncomfortable, to take action despite the fears that you feel, and to embrace your process. Like riding a bike, the risk of falling can be terrifying. But you have to be willing to get back up, take your training wheels off, to experience a world beyond what you know and beyond the narrative you continue to tell yourself. The power of strategic disruption can transform our lives, but we have to be willing to take a step beyond the boundaries of our comfort zone. Your life depends on it, and your impact requires it. So it is my hope that the world gets to experience what you are carrying on the inside. Though it's scary, get back on your bike, because the world and your breakthrough awaits you. Thank you.
Yes, give him a round of applause. I'm inspired all over again, JJ, and we'll wait for you too. And while JJ is joining, just a reminder, I see a hand raised. For the run of show, what we're going to do first is JJ is going to take the primary facilitator role and ask Lavar some questions. JJ will probably turn to me a few times and see whether I have anything to add. I may not. And we have folks like Brandy and Gina who are monitoring the chat to see if anything's upvoted. And at the end, the final 10 minutes, we'll have people raising their hands and being able to come up and meet Lavar and turn their cameras on. Now, I will say that for folks who don't want to turn their cameras on, if you want a facilitator like Gina or Brandy to read the chat, feel free to write the word facilitator in your question and we'll take care of it for you. So JJ, take it away.
Yeah. Thanks, Lena. Lavar, again, very well done. I echo the chat. That was very inspiring, very powerful. How did you feel when you were on the stage delivering that TED Talk?
Oh my gosh. It was nerve-wracking because you put so much time, effort, and practice into 10 minutes. So that 10-minute speech took about 6 to 7 months to prepare. I was meeting with coaches, every 2 weeks to kind of get the message tight and to have it delivered in such a way that it doesn't feel scripted, and it's natural, and I connected with the audience. But it was nerve-wracking a bit, but I think, my love for public speaking and my love for just reaching and connecting with people with my message, I think brought excitement as well, because you can see how people were so engaged in the audience. I saw people taking notes. I had a lot of familiar faces, like David Greaves was there as well, and my wife and my family. So it was nice to see my village there to support me as well while I, pursue a bucket list item.
Yeah, and very well done. And I think that certainly the message resonates with me and sure with other folks. And I'm sure you've gotten some feedback since that TED Talk, or people have shared experiences where they use this concept of strategic disruption in their lives. And I really liked when you were talking about how this doesn't have to look the same for everyone, that strategic disruption requires getting comfortable with the uncomfortable and the action. And I'm curious to hear, what are some examples of friends or your family or colleagues that people have shared with you about how they've used strategic disruption in their own lives?
Yeah, I'll keep it in region 3. David Greaves is one of my good friends, and I remember in 2020, right before I guess at the beginning of the pandemic, he's into nature photography, and I remember he was like sending his photos to different competitions, and sometimes getting disappointed with the feedback. And I'm like, why not have your own event, create your own platform, and showcase your own work? and we decided to collaborate and work together, and had basically an exhibit at Region Three's old office. And he was able to showcase his work, and we facilitated this big event. And since then, he's gone on to, having museum exhibits and, teaching lectures across different states and going out the country and teaching nature photography. So to see how, something as small as an exhibit at EPA can translate into really dreaming bigger, pushing the comfort zone. And he would tell you he doesn't like public speaking. He's getting more and more opportunities to speak in public and share his passion. So I would say that's an example of, watching a close friend really take a leap on their goals and push the boundaries on their comfort zone and continue to do so on a daily basis. So yeah.
It just reminds me actually that anecdote about, similarly, I think it was a previous TED Talk. I think it was the TED Talk we discussed grief and death, Lena, but we talked about how pain and discomfort can sometimes be the touchstone of growth, of peace. And clearly that picture of the picture side by side that you shared, you've grown tremendously, I'm sure, personally, professionally over years. How would you, when you want to disrupt something, that discomfort, how do you stay present in that discomfort? How do you move through that discomfort? Is it the end goal in mind, or what is your process for that?
Yeah, great question. I think it's easy to want to escape the discomfort. And I'm naturally a problem solver. So when I feel discomfort, I'm trying to do things to make the situation better. Um, and sometimes I have to just stop myself to ask myself, like, what am I learning right now? What am I avoiding? What am I trying to occupy my time with so I can just not be present in the moment? And that takes mindfulness, that takes therapy, that takes, having people hold you accountable. That takes, calling out your ego at times, and really getting to your authentic core. So, so those are all things that I do. I think having a good support system to lean into and to help process some of the events that are happening in my life, is helpful. Like I would say in 2018, when my father passed away, that's probably one of the biggest disruptions of my life. You mentioned grief. Grief is a huge disruptor. And at the time, I was in grad school, and it happened within my first 2 weeks into grad school. And I had to, I thought I was in a good mental headspace to continue. And I decided to withdraw because I wasn't in a mental, emotional, or spiritual place to uh, to be in school. And it was such a hard decision because it felt like I was quitting, but it was really life allowing me to slow down, to just get myself together, to be in a position to pursue grad school. And then in 2020, I went back to school and I got my master's degree. Um, but I think in that season, and still, and in grief is an interesting thing because it's a day-to-day process. It's seasonal, and sometimes it sneaks up on you when you least expect it. But I think for me, it was being able to acknowledge my emotions, my feelings, and process what I was going through. And I think that process alone catapulted me to another level because I was now more self-aware and able to go deeper and within myself. And it helped with my communication, it helped my coaching, it helped in my career because I was able to, invest in being a better version of myself.
Thank you, and thanks, Lavar, for sharing that experience. I know that my life has also been touched by folks dying, and in the moment, I remember this idea of everything happens for a reason, right? And I was like, I throw that in the trash can. Like, why would a tragedy happen for a reason? But practicing mindfulness, and Lena, I want to ask, since that topic came up, I want to turn to you, but practicing this mindfulness of a working part of the mind where it's a perspective shift where, like, yes, it's pain right now. No, that no one deserved this pain, or I didn't deserve this pain, but hopefully this too shall pass, and there will be something I can grow into in the future. So yeah, talk about disruption. Thank you. And Lena, I want to turn it to you. The concept of mindfulness came up. It's coming up for you.
I find this such an authentic and beautiful discussion. I'm hoping people in the chat also can ask questions while we're talking, and they'll have an opportunity. The interesting about mindfulness and the science behind grief and discomfort, they say, and I have found it to be personally true, and it sounds like from what Lavar said, he found it to be true. The natural human tendency when feeling sadness, grief, discomfort is to move away. Don't like how it feels. Let me move away. Let me tamp it down. Let me stay away from it. Let me hide from it. Let me just not feel it. Maybe there's alcohol, there's online shopping, there's lots of distractions that tend to help us move away from it. But we all know the sad truth of that is that tends to allow something to grow in how it's sad. And the mindfulness research and the brain science is showing us now that when you feel, if everyone can mute, if everyone can mute themselves, we hear a little bit of a conversation. Jay, can you tell who? Oh, they muted. Thank you.
Got it.
The research shows that if you actually, through mindfulness, and another word for mindfulness is just with intention, if you move towards the grief, if you move towards the discomfort and do the opposite of what your body actually wants to, your body wants to move away. But if you make an intentional move towards, what does sadness feel like? What does grief feel like in my body? It's actually the most powerful way to actually chip away at the grief and at the sadness by not trying to hide from it. So there's so much, social scientists knew this to be true for the past decades. Neuroscience is now catching up and showing that if you turn towards those feelings of discomfort, like Lavar said, his father passed away. He started thinking deeply about it. Many people know friends, many of them ourselves. Somebody passes away, we try not to think about it. We try to avoid it. So that's the thought on mindfulness and how Lavar, it sounds like he's exemplifying deeply going towards the grief to then therefore move towards strategic disruption. Lavar, does that sound like what you were doing?
Absolutely. And, I think my faith in God as well, spirituality has helped tremendously. Just being able to, you know, recognizing both the pain and the joys of that moment and the lessons learned. Um, I watched the movie Inside Out for the first time like 2 weeks ago. And it it was a reminder that, both sadness and joy can coexist. And I think that was a big takeaway. And sometimes, you try, when you feel sadness, you try to get rid of the sadness. But I think sadness also makes us human. It makes us have empathy as leaders. It makes us care about the world around us. So being able to, normalize those emotions, and that, we can hold a space for every emotion that we experience, I think it, at least helps put a lot of the events in my life in perspective.
Can I ask a quick question, JJ, Lavar, both of you? It sounds like, Lavar, that you equate strategic disruption a little bit to being your authentic self. And JJ, you've alluded to this as well. But we're all sort of raised in a culture that has a paradigm of only showing your successful, wonderful self. So that's hard. It's harder to do than one would think to be authentic. For both of you, is there an example of an easy way to move towards that? That's a baby step for people who are still thinking, I love the thought of strategic disruption, but whose minds have been acculturated to be in a culture where don't just do what everyone else is saying is the right thing to do and the best way to look good.
Yeah, for me, I think it was separating my worth from the event. And that takes time. it takes time to look at a failed event and say, I'm not a failure. I just wasn't successful with that thing that I was working on. I can tell you that the amount of times that I went blank on a speech in front of an audience and I felt like I was a failure. I didn't want to speak again because of the embarrassment or the thoughts that was happening in my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think about me and what's going to happen? And I think we do that so often in a lot of areas of our lives where we take the event and we allow it to indicate or determine who we are as individuals. And that's not the case. So I think once you can separate the two ideas that a failed event doesn't mean you're a failure, it just means that maybe you could have done things differently, or maybe there's so much lessons in failure, and I think we shy away from it. Like we learn more about ourselves in a failed event than we do in success. Because in success, there's not always feedback. In failure, you can look back at the tape. You know, you look at sports, you know, teams look at tape. If they didn't make the playoffs, they go back and they reevaluate what went wrong. Where did we break down? So you can be more tactical and strategic in a failed event than you can really in a success. So I would tell anybody, you know, in terms of a baby steps, it's just affirming to yourself that this event doesn't determine me, you know, and repeating that to yourself until it goes into from the conscious to the subconscious and it becomes a belief.
That's really when you're saying repeating that. There's this phrase mentor of mine uses, "Fake it till you make it," which sometimes I love, sometimes I don't really love. But the I can equate it to being trans and gender. Like, I think I had constructed this idea of who I was is based on my old position, based on how I presented, how I expressed in this like masculine way in DC and like suit and tie, stuff like that. And it was it became really like, how do you break something, or how did I like trying to pull that apart and make that realization? I mean, because there's so many I could have thought about it and did think about it for years. And I think that I remember talking to a friend about it, which one, talk about strategic disruption, even just sharing that with a friend, like having that one dinner conversation. And I remember my friend at that dinner conversation, I was like, do you ever, like question your gender? He was another gay person, and he said, and he was always done up like, I don't even know, Liberace, Elton John, like he had the boa stuff. Like he's an artist, and I was like, do you ever think about your gender? And he said, no, no, I don't. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, me neither. But and that fear of like not getting I put myself in that discomfort, and then I survived it. It wasn't a big deal. It might have been a brief moment of feeling exposed or misunderstood. But it's taking those like small things. And something I still do is when I hear someone or see someone wearing something or heard someone go on a trip or something like that, I'm like, "Ah, I wish I could do that." If whenever I catch myself, I wish I could do that. No, I can do that. And it's about like, how do I take the action to do it, right? Seeing someone with like early days, like flowy pants. I remember I really loved flowy pants. And I was like, "Oh, I wish I could wear that." Of course I can. Why not? And so it's like those baby steps of just, why can't you?
Mhm. Thank you, both of you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop and look at the time and see whether Gina and Brandy, if you'd like to join, and if you have any questions for, it's almost like Lavar and JJ in herself is a strategic disruptor as well. Both, it's a conversation, JJ, so you go like this. Anyone, would you like to join or comment? And if not, we have a number of juicy questions that JJ's gonna ask Lavar. We'll give it a moment. Also quiet out there. It's after lunch. Jump into the juicy questions, says Sharon. Okay, Sharon, thanks. JJ, more juicy questions, please.
Yeah. So I want to ask Lavar, you seem to be have very busy personal and professional lives, and congratulations on all your success again. I think
Thank
part
you.
of the strategic disruption you're talking about is looking at routine and comfort zone and sort of breaking that mold. And I'm wondering, how do you balance everything you've got going on in your life? There's some routine that's necessary. How do you balance work and all of these external pursuits like TED Talks? And how do you do it all? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, you do it all by doing a little every day. Um, um, I think, you know, more so now, I'm trying to do the opposite of like just being busy because I think it's so easy to get caught up in doing so much that you lose yourself in that space. And then you realize that you're just stretched really thin and you can't be present for the moments you want to be present in because you're often thinking about the next thing to do. So I'm actually, my strategic disruption is now being still, right? It's doing the opposite of trying
Yeah.
to conquer the world. It's really it's journaling. It looks like being still in the morning. It looks like questioning my urgency to say yes to something. Um, so that's my new it's my new routine now. Learning to say no. Um, being more intentional about how I spend my time. Um, uh, are things that I do more so now. So whether it's having game night with the family or you know reaching out to loved ones and saying, hey, I love you, I'm checking in, how you doing, or I recently started karate back in March. So just I think finding prioritizing self-care um, has been how I've been able to navigate all of the balls that I juggle. And there are times when the balls do fall. Um, Grief is one event that causes all of the balls to fall and force you to reevaluate what's important. Um, but also just I think giving myself grace and being kind to myself on days when I'm not able to keep all the balls in the air or I don't feel like keeping balls up in the air. And I've created this image around me that I have kept the balls up in the air. I think just being honest. Um, and I think that's the importance of having a village. Um, it's important to have a therapist, you know, and being able to just be vulnerable and talk about these things because I think if you can normalize mental health, if we can normalize these things, I think it makes it easier for us not to fall into this perfectionist tendency that we need to have it all together every day. Some days I have it together, other days I don't. Most days I'm managing. So that's how I navigate it.
The question, what will the next TED Talk be about?
Oh man. Yeah. Well, 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 not really a TED Talk, but I've been working on my book and I plan to release it in September. So be on the lookout for that. But I think it captures a lot of what we're talking about today in terms of, you know, how do we begin to initiate strategic disruption? How do we begin to kind of rewrite narratives for our lives? So not a TED Talk, but it'll be a talk in a book.
That's incredible. You mentioned your family and you said you had kids, correct?
Yes, I have a stepson.
How do you see your stepson? How do you see him? As a kid, I was a performer. I loved to perform, but there were some areas that I didn't feel as um, confident, namely sports. And my family put me in every single sport you could imagine. How do you see? How are you teaching that lesson to him about stepping out of your comfort zone? Have you seen him pick any of that up? I mean, he has such an impressive role model in you.
Yeah, he hates public speaking. So it's trying to you know help him to find himself in this world. I think everyone is in search of is searching for something, identity. And for me, I think I've just been extremely intentional about helping him to understand his worth and his value. um, getting clear about his gifts and how he wants to express that in the world. And I think it's easy for parents to kind of project upon their kids, based on what they've done or what they want their kids to do. So yeah, I think it's a day by day experience, and I think just getting him to understand who he is. He's 14, so his brain is not my brain, in terms of how developed I am now. But I think it's getting getting him to trust the process of his own journey and learning lessons along the way while providing exposure to new experiences. So yeah, little by
Beautifully
little,
said.
he's picking it up.
Beautifully said. I see David asked in the chat, can you talk about managing the vision of success when pursuing dreams versus the work that needs to happen to achieve that success?
Great question. We talk about this all the time. I I think we focus so much on success that we forget about the process, right? It's like the nice car with the bow on top, but you forget that you got to work to get to it. And we live in a very uh, over, I guess, a very social media world now where everything looks like an overnight success, and you don't see the process. Um, but it's the process that builds the character. It's the process that builds the perspective on things. So I think when you have a vision for something, I think it's important to understand all the steps that's involved, and that to really execute on the vision that you have, it requires a lot of subvisions, to hold yourself accountable, taking daily action steps, dealing with the emotional baggage that comes from experiences that show up when you're trying to do something new. Um, so it's extremely important to you know, write your vision down. One, get clarity about what it is that you're trying to do, but also what do you need, right? What are the resources you need? What's the support system you need? Um, who do you need to be to execute that vision, right? Because we can have a vision and not be the person, or not being in a space to execute that vision because of the habits that we've accumulated over our lifetime. So it's getting clear about what are the skill sets, what's the knowledge, what's the gaps that we need to kind of fill for us to be in the position to pursue whatever vision that we have, and that the success will come. If you seek to add value, success will come. But if you focus on the success before the process, you're doomed for frustration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like that you said doomed for frustration, not failure. Um, in fact, one of the most challenging questions that I was asked this year by a friend, one of my relationships was, well, what do you need? What are your needs? And I was taken aback. I had no idea how to even answer that question. And it can be something that seems so intuitive or fundamental. Um, and per some professional advice, I too have been journaling and meditating in the mornings to get that sort
Nice.
of clarity you mentioned. Um, I have another question in the chat from Manushka. Do you have any advice in advocating for yourself in the workplace or in personal relationships?
Yeah, that's a good one. I'll start with personal relationships. First, I think it's important to have boundaries or understand your boundaries. Um, it's something that it's easy to assume that there's boundaries in relationships, and but not communicate them, so people necessarily don't know how to interact with you, or when those crossing those lines. So I think we have to get into a habit, particularly for people who are non-confrontational, people who get uncomfortable with the feeling of like, oh my gosh, like that feeling that people who are listening know what I'm talking about, where like, I don't feel like touching that thing because it's uncomfortable. I think we have to kind of normalize saying what we need, and it doesn't have to be in a confrontational way. but we can't expect people to know what we need or know what we want. So we have to, become more comfortable sharing what we need. And especially if you're trying to create disruption in your life and create an environment for you to thrive in, you have to be able to kind of outline what are those things that you need for you to be a healthy version of yourself, and defining that for other people to either support you or know that, I don't want to be a part of that. um, in the workplace, um, it's layered and it's complicated, right? Because um, you know, depending on which program you're in or which role you're in, or who's your supervisor or who your colleagues, like, you're dealing with micromanagement or microaggressions and all these different things. And I think um, in a working environment, you may not often feel comfortable sharing certain things because you may not know how it's going to come off. So in that regard, it's helpful having a work mentor. It's helpful having a confidant in the workplace or outside the workplace that you can get some feedback on a case by case situation. Because I think in general, of course, you know how you can communicate what you need or advocate for yourself, but then there's just certain nuances and bureaucratic systems in place that may make it hard for you to apply for a job or get or interview or just different things like that. And it's helpful to just have allies, having folks, mentors, coaches that can help you navigate some of those specific instances for you to advocate for the best in that particular situation. So, um, yeah, that's what I would say for both the personal and the workplace.
That's great. That's a great answer, Lavar. And I know I have a work mentor who said I did the uncomfortable, disruptive thing, which was to say, "Hey, I'm interested in this one position. Hey, I'm interested in this role, and I intend to pursue it." And I was kind of nervous for the answer because that was not typical of my behavior. And she said, "Careers don't just fall into the laps of women." And of course, other folks who are marginalized in the workplace, and to always ask for what you want. And even if someone's not able to give it to you, maybe they can help you on that path, right? Especially asking for help was not something that I was accustomed to in an early version of myself. So this has been so excellent. And Lena, I want to turn it to you to help us wrap up. And if there are any other questions that folks have, please feel free to put them in the chat.
And in addition to putting them in the chat, the last names of both JJ and Lavar, and they're people who would love to continue the conversation if you're interested in doing the same. And I know many people are inspired. I'm hoping Gina and Brandy and Brittany, if they're still around, can turn their cameras on so people can lay their eyeballs on this planning team that puts together these wonderful sessions that we call in Region 3 TED Talk Tuesdays. And like Brandy said earlier, they're on topics that are ways to connect with one another, to engage, like forest bathing and grief and gratitude and Lavar and strategic disruption. But it's also to help us all become better humans and therefore better public servants to be able to do what we do by being connected and knowing how to navigate this in community. I want to thank JJ for being an amazing primary facilitator. Lavar, especially for joining us, coming back to Region 3. Again, I'll never forget that day when I first met him. Gina Sosha was in the same building at that time, and this new guy named Lavar Thomas comes along, and here he is. Um, uh, I'd like to say on behalf of the team that this team loves getting feedback from all of you, whether you're Region 3 or headquarters, on our next topics. And if anyone is sitting there watching and thinking, wow, this is such a wonderful space of authenticity, I'd love to be involved, reach out to myself or any of the planning team and let us know if you'd like to be involved in doing this, because this is how all of us started doing it, serving all of you. So round of applause, emojis. Maybe folks can turn their cameras on so Lavar can see who came to join him, and maybe some waves. And we're going to close things gently out on that note. because I know it'll be fun for Lavar to see the faces. Thanks, JJ and team.
Of course. Thank you so much, Lena, and thanks, Lavar. And please share
Thank
any
you.
resources in the chat. Any way we can stay connected.
Okay,
This is excellent. Appreciate you.
will do. Good to see you, Patricia. Thank you, Darlene, for joining.
Bye, everyone.